There comes a moment, often unnoticed, when your own breath begins to sound loud in the quiet room. Not because anything dramatic has happened, but because you are finally still enough to hear how tired you are. It's the kind of fatigue that doesn't show on your face, the kind that settles deeper. A slow, familiar heaviness you've learned to carry without complaint. You know this feeling. It appears in the late hours, when someone's name lights up your phone again, and you already know what they want before you pick up. You sit there, staring at the screen, knowing that once you answer, you will pour from the same nearly empty place you always do. And somehow, you still reach for it, not because you have strength, but because you've trained yourself to keep giving, even when there is nothing left to give. Most people never see that moment. They don't see the quiet kitchen where you stand alone after everyone has gone to bed, leaning on the counter, trying to gather the pieces of yourself you scattered throughout the day. They don't see the way you pause before responding to a message, feeling the weight of their need pressing into your already thin patience. They don't hear the small whisper inside that asks, just once, to be allowed to rest. You've lived so much of your life in that space between duty and disappearance, always showing up, always steady, always the one who absorbs the storm so that others don't have to. And yet, each time you say yes, some small, barely noticeable part of you dims, like a lantern burning through the last of its oil, determined to glow even as the wick begins to curl inward. The metaphor of the lantern fits because that's what you've become, a light everyone relies on, even when the flame trembles. You keep shining out of habit, out of love, out of fear that if you don't, someone will fall into darkness. But you too need warmth. You too need a place to rest your glow. You feel it now, the truth you've been avoiding. Not spoken aloud, not acknowledged, but present in the hollow behind your ribs. You have been carrying too much. And tonight, in this small and quiet honesty, you finally hear the weight of your own stillness. There is a reason you give more than you have, and it rarely begins with generosity. It begins with a quiet, almost invisible hope. The hope that if you are endlessly helpful, endlessly available, endlessly understanding, then you will never be dismissed, forgotten, or left behind. We rarely admit this to ourselves. We call it kindness, responsibility, loyalty. But beneath all that, there is often a softer truth. You learned long ago that to be loved, you must first disappear. You know the rhythm of this pattern. You feel it in the way you answer calls you don't want to take, not because the person on the other end truly needs you, but because you're afraid of what your silence might mean. You fear becoming unimportant in someone else's story, as if your worth depends on how much of yourself you surrender. There was a time, perhaps you remember it clearly, perhaps it's only a vague impression, when you tried to say, "I'm tired," but the words caught somewhere in your throat. Someone asked how you were, and you said, "I'm fine," even as your hands trembled from the weight of holding everything together. And they believed you, because you'd trained them to. You made it easy for others to overlook your weariness by hiding it so well. Or maybe you recall a moment when you fixed something no one asked you to fix, a broken plan, a forgotten errand, a small crisis that wasn't yours. You stepped in automatically, without thought, as though the world would fall apart if you did not offer yourself as glue. And afterward, there was no gratitude, no recognition, no pause. Just the quiet continuation of a life where your efforts disappeared the moment they were given. This is how these emotional contracts form, unspoken, assumed, reinforced over years. You give because you fear the emptiness that might follow if you stopped. You give because somewhere along the way you absorbed the idea that being good means never asking anything for yourself. You give because the alternative, being still, being unmet, being ordinary, feels unbearable. And yet, in the slow honesty of this moment, you begin to see it. The more you erase yourself, the more invisible you become. There comes a moment when the truth stands quietly in front of you, the way morning light slips beneath a closed door. It doesn't announce itself. It simply arrives, and suddenly you can see the shape of your life more clearly than before. You begin to understand that what you've called kindness has slowly been cutting into you, not in one dramatic stroke, but in small, patient ways. A little more given here, a little less of yourself left there. You look back and notice how often your hands reached out before your mind even asked why. How often you stepped into someone else's trouble before they even knew they needed rescuing. How often you vanished into the role of the dependable one, the steady one, the one who absorbs every bruise without showing the mark. This is the quiet turning point, the recognition that your goodness has been carved out of your disappearance, and it catches you, not like a blow, but like a breath you suddenly realize you haven't taken in years. There is a simple, unembellished truth beneath all of this. Anything unprotected eventually breaks. A tree that leans too far toward every passing wind cannot stand for long. It bends for one person, bends for another, and slowly forgets the shape it once held. And so have you. You bent in every direction until you mistook bending for love. You start to see the cost of it. The evenings where your voice grew thin. The mornings where you woke already depleted. The rooms you left quietly so others could remain comfortable. You see how your silence became the softest form of self-abandonment. How you kept offering warmth long after the fire inside you had cooled to embers. There is no anger in this awareness, no blame, only a steady, unbroken clarity rising like a lantern lifted from the floor. You realize that kindness without limits does not make you more human. It dissolves you. And there is both sadness and relief in finally witnessing that. The truth settles into you, calm and undeniable. To give everything is to lose the one who gives. There is a particular kind of strength that doesn't raise its voice, doesn't tremble, doesn't chase. It begins quietly, the way you reach for your phone and simply let it ring. Not out of spite, not out of punishment, but from a deeper understanding that your energy is not an endless well, and it no longer belongs to every hand that reaches for it. This is where refusal takes shape, not as a sharp edge, not as a slammed door, but as a threshold you no longer cross. You feel the shift inside you. Something settles, something steadies. You are no longer pulled by every urgency that isn't yours. A door closes softly behind you. You can almost hear the air change on the other side. Not a barrier, not a barricade, just a clear line between what drains you and what lets you breathe again. You begin to understand that silence has a language of its own. It says, I have returned to myself. It says, I am unwilling to spend what I do not have. And most importantly, it says nothing that must be defended. There is a muted phone on the table, screen glowing and dimming in patient intervals. You watch it without tension. There is no impulse to explain, no need to soften the refusal with apologies. Your absence speaks in a tone kinder than any overextended yes ever could. You realize something else too, that walking away is not abandonment. It is an act of respect for both lives involved. You are no longer offering what was never sustainable. They are no longer receiving what came from depletion. In this way, distance becomes a gentler truth than presence. And as you step back, the world doesn't collapse. The people who depended on your endless giving learn to stand in their own light. The weight you carried so long begins to fall away, one quiet inch at a time. There is no victory in this, only balance. A calm, steady re-entry into your own existence. You owe no explanation for choosing peace. Peace is explanation enough. And as the evening settles, the curtains lift slightly with the passing wind, and the house quiets. Think of yourself as a house at dusk, not empty, not closed off, simply settling into its own quiet. The day has ended, the light has softened, and every room holds a gentle glow that doesn't need to reach beyond its walls to be complete. This house has doors, yes, but also thresholds, places where inside meets outside, where your inner warmth greets the world without giving itself away. Here, boundaries are not barricades, they are the soft edges that protect the stillness within. You begin to feel this in your own life. Your silence is no longer the silence of exhaustion, but the silence of returning home. You speak less, not because you're withholding, but because the words you spent so freely before are now resting in the rooms you've long neglected. The lantern in the hallway, the one you used to carry from person to person, lighting their corners while yours stayed dim, now hangs by your door. Its light is steady, warm, enough for you, and enough for anyone who steps close with genuine care. You no longer walk miles in the dark to offer it. Those who want to see you can come to your threshold, where your presence is whole and not divided. Distance, in this new sense, becomes gentleness. You step back not to disappear, but to preserve the harmony that gets lost when you pour yourself past your limits. You finally understand that love without space becomes noise, and space, when held with sincerity, becomes a softer form of devotion. There is comfort in this quiet. You hear the creak of your own floors, the hum of evening settling, the gentle rhythm of being enough for yourself. The rooms that once felt abandoned now breathe again. You walk through them slowly, grateful for the peace you're relearning. No one is shut out. They are simply no longer invited to dismantle the structure of your being. And still, there is love, clearer now, unforced, unstraining. It flows not from sacrifice, but from steadiness. The house glows from within, and its light reaches only as far as it can without dimming. Silence, you discover, is the kindness that keeps you whole. There is a moment, somewhere near the end of all this, when you stop arguing with your past. Not because everything makes sense now, and not because the pain has vanished, but because you finally accept that you don't need to carry the weight of every version of yourself you once were. You stand in that quiet place, the same place where exhaustion first whispered for help, where clarity slowly unfolded, where silence became a refuge instead of a punishment, and you realize you are no longer trying to prove anything. Not your goodness, not your usefulness, not your value to people who never learned how to meet you with the same depth you offered. There is a lightness in this acceptance, a calm that doesn't rush in but settles gradually, like dust floating down in a sunlit room. You feel the old guilt loosening its hold, strand by strand, until it becomes nothing more than a story the body no longer believes. You can sense the shape of your life changing. You no longer brace yourself for demands. You no longer anticipate the next request, the next emotional weight someone might place in your hands. Your palms are open now, not to give, not to receive, but simply to rest. It's strange at first, this emptiness. Not hollow, not cold, just unoccupied. The kind of space that feels like a door left open on purpose, letting fresh air move through the rooms of you. You walk more slowly. You breathe more deeply. You speak only when something true rises in you, unforced. The world doesn't press in the way it used to. Or maybe it does. but you no longer move toward every sound. You've learned the art of letting things pass by without reaching for them. You've learned that peace is not something you earn, it is something you allow. There is no dramatic ending here, no grand transformation, no sudden revelation. Just a quiet release, a letting go of the need to explain why your no is enough, why your silence is valid, why your boundaries are not betrayals. You do not need to justify the life you choose. You only need to live it. And in this final settling of breath and thought, something inside you softens and expands, as if finally remembering itself. Freedom begins where explanation ends.